All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Toolbox Tuesday session featuring environmental justice tools for local planning with SBCTA and SCAG. My name is Annalie Ekman. I'm a senior regional planner at SCAG. I'll be kicking off today's session before handing it over to our awesome speakers. And while we introduce the session, I welcome you all to introduce yourselves in the chat, say hi to each other. You can provide your name, organization, pronouns, where you're calling in from today. All right. On the slide before you is a handful of logistics items. The meeting's anticipated to be about an hour and a half, possibly a little bit shorter than that. It will be recorded. All participant lines are muted upon entry. There will be several opportunities throughout for questions and answers. And if you have a question during a presentation, we encourage you to type it in the chat or press the raise hand function on Zoom. And today's meeting, again, will be recorded and will be posted on SCAG's website and sent to everybody who registered after the event. And at this time, I'd like to offer a short land acknowledgement. We're currently on occupied and unceded land of Indigenous peoples who are and have been the traditional caretakers of the land in this region. I'm calling in from Chumash, Gabrielino, and Tongva land. And I'd also like to take this moment to highlight the Tribal Data Needs Assessment for Tribal Resilience Project. One of the deliverables for SCAG's Inclusive Economic Recovery Strategy is a study on unique economic and demographic needs of tribal and indigenous communities in the SCAG region. And staff and our partners at Brookings Metro presented an update on this project at the April 4th CEHD meeting. And you can check out that update through the link in the chat if you're interested, again, in the Tribal Data Needs Assessment project. And as this session is part of our equity series of Toolbox Tuesdays, I like to frame this session within SCAG's equity efforts. In July 2020, SCAG's Regional Council adopted a resolution affirming its commitment to advancing justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion throughout Southern California. This led to the development of a working definition of racial equity and the Racial Equity Early Action Plan. The action plan includes 4 goals and 3 strategies to advance racial equity through SCAG's policies, practices, and activities. And one of those goals is to encourage racial equity in local planning practices, which is what we aim to do through these equity-focused Toolbox Tuesday sessions, some of which are listed on this slide, and you can access previous Toolbox Tuesday sessions through another link in the chat. It's on the presentation slide. But several opportunities to learn from examples in the region and outside of the region about equitable practices in planning. We're going to launch a quick poll just to give you all an opportunity to do some intros, just group-wise. And so we can go ahead and launch that. There are 3 questions. Here we go. Oh, sorry. Oh, I messed it up, Jen. I'm sorry. Wait, is there a way to reset that? Hold on. Stop sharing. Can we relaunch poll? Continue. Okay. Is that popping up now? I see Jeannie nodding. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. So asking what type of organization you're representing, where you're calling in from geographically. And then there's a question about environmental justice elements and policies in either the jurisdiction you work for or maybe the one you live in. I would choose one of those when you're framing this question. But maybe you don't know either one. So that's an option you can choose at the end of or as the last option in the poll answers. And also, if you're done with the poll and you haven't already, you can definitely say hi to people in the chat and introduce yourselves. Oh, Sue, yeah. Oh.
I only saw one question on the poll. Either I did something incorrectly or it's only showing one at a time or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, just to let you know, somebody else did the same thing as me.
Yeah, I now see that there are lots more people responding just to the first question. Yeah, you had to scroll down to see, but I think you can go at the bottom of the screen. There's like a polls. You might be able to respond again or revise your response.
I don't see anything like that on my screen, probably because I'm not I'm not in charge, you know.
Possibly. Yeah, I get that. I'm not sure how to bring that up as a participant. But the questions were the type of organization you're coming from, where you're coming from. So are you coming from the SCAG region, somewhere else in California, somewhere else in the US, outside of the US? And you can feel free to, again, introduce yourself in the chat. And maybe the most important question of this is, has the jurisdiction you work for or live in incorporated an EJ element, or sorry, environmental justice into your general plan? And the options included things like, my jurisdiction hasn't adopted EJ element. We've adopted EJ policies. We're currently working on developing EJ elements or policies into the general plan. We're interested in implementing EJ, and we're not currently considering EJ policies at all. And the last option is, I have no idea. I don't know. So thank you, team, for copying in the chat. But I'll end the poll and share some results. But note that incomplete picture of all of the participants here. So, but looks like most people who responded to the poll are coming from local government, some maybe consultants or private companies. We have some community members and advocacy organizations here, some academics. We're mostly coming from the SCAG region, which is great. Welcome. And we have a pretty mixed response to the EJ question. Lots of people don't know. And one of the things that I'd suggest as a takeaway from this session is to go, especially if you're like not familiar with like the agency that you live in, as opposed to, you may be more familiar with the agency you work for. Go check out your city's website, look for their general plan, see how environmental justice has been incorporated, or maybe they're working on incorporating EJ. Could even just Google it right now and check. But with that, I will move on to introduce Jeannie Ma, who's our Assistant Regional Planner with SCAG. She's here to introduce SB 1000, Senate Bill 1000, and environmental justice to us. And yeah, so take it away, Jeannie.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Emily, for the introduction. So I'm going to get right into it. I am going to provide a brief overview of SB 1000. And so here is a environmental justice timeline where it's going to have some important dates. So the environmental justice movement, it traces roots back to the civil rights era of the 1960s, when marginalized communities, particularly that of African Americans, mobilized against environmental injustices, as demonstrated through the Memphis sanitation strike of 1968. And then we move on over into the 1970s, where California set a precedent by defining environmental justice and incorporating it into projects. While in Houston, they also demonstrated a lot of environmental justice advocacy, where they were fighting against landfills being built near schools. So the movement gained momentum in the 1990s with the adoption of the 17 principles at the first people of color environmental summit that will later lay the foundation to other EJ policy documents. And then we move on forward with federal agencies that began developing their own environmental justice strategies to address environmental inequalities. And in 1998, SCAG actually released its first environmental justice technical report. And then we later fast forward to 2023, where the Biden administration renewed focus on environmental justice, prioritizing funding for projects and policies to address systemic disparities. So I'm going to give some context as to what SB 1000 is. So it is a local government with, so it has local governments with disadvantaged communities that are required to adopt an EJ element or integrate EJ related policies. It was signed into law in 2016 and became effective in 2018. And it is triggered when a jurisdiction with one or more disadvantaged communities revises two or more general plan elements. And so SCAG created the SB 1000 tracker. So a former intern and myself conducted a comprehensive review of EJ elements for the jurisdictions located in the region. And what this meant was that we reviewed a lot of the resources. So we looked at local jurisdictions that have adopted or published EJ elements. And we also looked at other citywide policy documents that might be a safety element or housing element that did address SB 1000 concerns and satisfied SB 1 requirements. And then the final thing we also identified was any type of EJ related projects and initiatives, such as with the city of Santa Monica, where they created their own commission for environmental justice, or the city of Long Beach, where they created their own data equity hub. So that was accounted for and recorded through the SB 1000 tracker. And then here's a chart that essentially shows the cities that had those adopted EJ elements, as well as those that incorporate EJ goals and policies. So this was, again, recorded. And we see about 79 of 196 jurisdictions did have some type of adopted environmental justice element or incorporated EJ goals and policies. While a majority of 117 jurisdictions out of 196 have not started on anything yet, or they may have not any type of statewide policy document addressing any type of SB 1000 or EJ related concerns. And this is just a further breakdown of where a lot of those jurisdictions are at the moment. So we see about 53 have adopted an EJ element. Maybe 5 of those local jurisdictions are still conducting public outreach. They're still scoping it out. But we do see that 117 of those jurisdictions have not started. And that may or not be because they have yet to trigger an SB 1000 requirement. Maybe they're only revising one of their elements at the moment, or maybe they don't have enough identified disadvantaged communities. So there could be a number of factors as to why they have not started. And so in this image right here, we have a bunch of jurisdictions that have disadvantaged communities within the SCAG region that have an EJ in their general plan or do not have EJ in their general plans. So in the county of Los Angeles, they have the most identified disadvantaged communities, but also the highest amount with EJ in their general plans, and disadvantaged communities without EJ in their general plans. So this is just to show where most of the counties are at in terms of their EJ status and SB 1000 status as well. And some takeaways when conducting and recording, updating the SCAG SB 1000 tracker is that less than half of SCAG jurisdictions include EJ in their general plans, while over half of SCAG jurisdictions with disadvantaged communities include environmental justice in their general plans. And overall, jurisdictions that address SB 1000 undertook additional initiatives, as mentioned with the city of Santa Monica and the city of Long Beach. Thank you. That was my quick overview on everything. I'm going to give it back to Emily.
Thanks, Jeannie. We'll save that last slide for the end of the session, so we can take those down. But I wanted to ask if there's any questions about Jeannie's presentation on SB 1000 and environmental justice before we get into it. Not seeing any chats or hands, but feel free to also just, if something comes up, throw it in the chat. Happy to discuss it and provide some additional context as well. But I am now honored to introduce our featured guest for this session. Mairany Anaya is our management analyst at San Bernardino County Transportation Authority, or SBCTA. She helped develop the SB 1000 Equity Toolkit. And at SBCTA, Mairany leads critical projects regarding housing, transportation, and equity in the Inland Empire. Prior to working at SBCTA, Mairany was at SCAG in working in housing programs. She's also been an environmental scientist for the Food and Agriculture Department of California and a Civic Spark Climate Fellow. So welcome, Mairany. We also have Eric Yurkovich, who is a principal at Raimi Associates, who helped create the SB 1000 Equity Toolkit as well. Eric has over 15 years of experience as a community planner focused on issues of sustainability, climate change, and urban planning. He specializes in developing comprehensive plans, climate action plans, adaptation and resiliency plans, and he brings a strong technical background to support policy and plan development. Additionally, he has co-authored the Guide to Equitable Community-Driven Climate Preparedness Planning and led trainings at the National APA Conference and California Adaptation Forum. So welcome, Eric. So super happy to have you both here. And yeah, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks so much, Annalie, for that great introduction. So hi, everybody, I'm Mairany, and we will be going over SBCTA's SB 1000 Equity Toolkit. And this presentation is really designed to be interactive, including a walkthrough of the toolkit itself by Eric later on in the presentation. And we really encourage you to drop any comments, reactions, questions in the chat as we go along. We'd love to see what you all think about the toolkit and your initial reactions to it. And so to start off, Jeannie gave a really great overview of SB 1000. And so we're going to touch on SB 1000 again very briefly, as well as go through the steps to developing an environmental justice element, as well as the SB 1000 toolkit walkthrough itself. And I'll be handing it over to Eric for that, to talk about the toolkit website and the environmental justice plan builder, as well as the features that are specific to San Bernardino County. And so before we get started, we really wanted to give a little bit more background on the SB 1000 Toolkit project. And so this was led by SBCTA and SBCOG, the Council of Government side to SBCTA. And the intent of it was to create a regionally specific toolkit to help our jurisdictions address environmental justice issues in their communities. And as you'll hear later on in the presentation today, the toolkit really provides the data analysis, policy, and the implementation support to create a general plan environmental justice element. And this project was funded through SCAG's allocation, thank you SCAG, of the Regional Early Action Planning Grants, also known as the REAP grants. And this toolkit was really informed by stakeholders, not only across San Bernardino County, but also the Office of Planning and Research, who are the ones that prepare the guidelines for the general plan, and the Office of the Attorney General, who reviewed and provided comments on the compliance portion of the element. And so we really wanted to ensure that the tools that were provided in the toolkit were up to the standards that were expected by the state, by both the Attorney General's office and OPR. And so just to quickly touch on, again, an overview of SB 1000. So it's also known as the Planning for Healthy Communities Act, and it was passed by the state legislature in 2016 and then went into effect in 2018. And so it requires cities and counties to develop an EJ element if they identify any disadvantaged communities and if they are concurrently adopting or updating 2 or more elements of their general plan. So if SB 1000 is triggered, then a jurisdiction has 2 options. They can update their EJ element, which is a separate and new element in their general plan, or implement EJ policies, which are a set of EJ-related goals, policies, and objectives integrated into other elements. And so for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to be using the legal term disadvantaged communities. But for the purposes of the toolkit itself, SBCTA and SBCOG refer to DACs, disadvantaged communities, as priority equity communities, so that we can align with the approach developed by SCAG and to center equitable investments as part of the SB 1000 process, and to have the toolkit cover both EJ and more broadly equity. And so once a jurisdiction has determined that they are subject to SB 1000, similar to other elements, there are really generally 3 main steps to putting together an EJ element. So there's an existing conditions analysis, an engagement phase, and a policy development phase. And I'll touch on these steps in the slides that follow. And these steps aren't necessarily meant to be consecutive, but just for the purposes of the slide and the diagram, this is how we show it. And OPR and the Attorney General's office really highly recommend that the engagement happens during all of the phases of the EJ element process. And so for the existing conditions analysis, there are generally 3 main steps. The use of CalEnviro screen, which are census tracts that identify census tracts in the top 25% of the index score, and the use of state low-income thresholds and American Community Survey data to identify low-income areas, and then cross-referencing those areas with individual pollution factors identified in the CalEnviro screen. And then the third method, identification and use of local and supplementary data sources to describe other potential health inequities and environmental injustices across topics, like healthy food, physical activity, safe and sanitary housing, etc. And so later on in the presentation, you'll really be able to see the data tools and how you can use them for these steps. So part of the toolkit is that we've done the work for you already. So you'll be able to see how cool that is in Eric's demo. And so the core spirit of SB 1000 is to meaningfully engage community members throughout the planning process. And this is stated in the state's environmental justice definition. They use the exact phrase of meaningful involvement. And the toolkit does provide fact sheets to support engagement, but local jurisdictions are still, they're the ones that still have to conduct their own meaningful engagement to comply with the law. And so after the DAC data analysis has been completed, and we've heard from members of DAC communities on their EJ priorities, we can start the final phase of the SB 1000 process, which is to develop the general plan goals, policies, and actions. And they must minimally address 6 topic areas, as you see on the screen, including examples for each. And so all of the topic areas must prioritize improvements and programs that address the needs of DACs. And that part is very clearly defined in the legislation. And an EJ element is not a public health for everyone element. It's meant to really improve the health and living conditions for DAC. So that's the clear distinction that we want to make. And now I'll pass it on to Eric to discuss the toolkit itself.
Thanks, Mairany. Do we want to take a few questions right now and just see if anyone has questions on your portion of the presentation so far before
Yes.
we jump into the toolkit itself? So if anyone has questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or Anna, why don't you?
Yeah. Feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, or drop it in the chat. Jude, I totally missed your question before we moved on to Mairany's presentation, but just want to elevate that SCAG is tracking these EJ elements. Yes, through because SB 1000 it was signed, and so we're tracking how that piece of legislation has impacted how policies are changing in the SCAG region, but not for any enforcement purposes, just to measure progress and see how our cities are adapting. But great question. I'm not totally sure on where that enforcement mechanism comes in, but again, as cities go to change their general plan, either in its entirety or 2 or more elements, that's when the SB 1000 and they have to have disadvantaged communities per the SB 535 definition. That's when that SB 1000 requirement kicks in. So, but great question.
And just to add to that too, the State Attorney General's office has an environmental justice division, and they are technically kind of the enforcement on statewide on environmental justice issues. And so what they have traditionally done is sent letters to jurisdictions who are out of compliance. If they find out through various mechanisms, they'll send them a letter and ask them to comply with the requirements. It's been a fairly light touch enforcement, but they also comment on letters, and we'll talk a little bit about that in my presentation, because that's some of the analysis that we did as part of the toolkit itself on what they wrote in letters to jurisdictions overall.
Thanks, Eric. Great context. Are there any other it doesn't have to be a question, maybe it's a thought about SBCTA's intro on their equity toolkit? If not, we can dive into that demo.
All right, well, I'll take it over. Thanks everyone for having us here today. My name is Eric Yurkovich. I'm a principal at Raimi Associates. I'm here instead of Juan Reynoso, who many of you know probably. Juan left Raimi just a couple of weeks ago, and he's at the California Wellness Foundation. So if you haven't connected with him there, you should, because he's continuing to do this awesome work. I have the fun job today, which is that I get to talk about the components of the toolkit and give a walkthrough. I'm going to try to make this as interactive as possible when I get to the toolkit itself, and I'm going to ask for jurisdictions, regions, topic areas that you want to know a little bit more about. So I want you to shout out some suggestions, and I'll be trying to do the demo on the fly and see how we do today. But just first of all, the toolkit itself includes sort of those three core components that Mairany laid out, so analysis, engagement, and policy development. But with the toolkit itself, we also provided resources to help jurisdictions plan and prepare to do their environmental justice analysis, as well as tools to help them actually implement the policies and actions that are associated with their environmental justice elements. So this I guess, little chart kind of summarizes all of the tools. So we have primers on SB 1000. We have a summary of all of the Attorney General's letters to jurisdictions on their EJ elements. We have a series of dashboards, both ArcGIS Online, but Microsoft Power BI, that you can explore data and information. That's some of the walkthrough that I'm going to do. We have tools on engagement and types of activities that you might want to do as part of your EJ element process. And then we have a series of kind of policies, kind of the structure of policies for our jurisdiction to use as a starting point and adapt as part of their EJ element updates or development. And then also additional implementation tools. So we have a racial equity assessment tool that you can use with your jurisdiction in the implementation of your work. So this is the landing page. Overall, it has a bunch of resources, sort of FAQs style, on the toolkit itself. And as Mairany mentioned, how we talk about disadvantaged communities, we use the term PECs, or priority equity communities. So I'll call them both throughout this presentation. Under the kind of the About SB 1000, you'll find a bunch of resources to help you prepare to do your elements, those primers and other tools that can help you understand the requirements for the work itself and give you some background on the things you might be doing in the process. The data tools section really will help you do the analysis and those components. EJ Builder, policy development, as we talked about. And then the resource library has a variety of different tools and resources that you can use both through preparation, engagement, policy development, and implementation overall. I just wanted to kind of highlight, there's kind of two main data tools that we developed as part of this process. The first is the ArcGIS mapping tools. Those include both a summary dashboard for the entire region, as well as kind of a more detailed map viewer that if you're a community member or a jurisdiction, you can zoom in to your jurisdiction, pull more data, look at more interactions between those priority equity communities and topics like housing, high resource areas, as well as the particular components of environmental burden. And then we have a series of kind of Microsoft Power BI dashboards. These are kind of the county scale, and you can see how a jurisdiction or a subregion stacks up against other jurisdictions and subregions within the county itself, to understand the number of people that are in the priority equity communities, the racial and ethnic demographics of those people, and then the particular environmental hazards or burdens that they suffer from. And then next, again, back to a key part of the tool is this environmental justice builder. And this is really intended to present sample policy language, really tailored to San Bernardino County in particular, and Inland Empire issues. It's not the full universe and every single policy one could write or every single action, but it provides kind of a focused set of those for communities within San Bernardino County. And then finally, there's a resource library, which I'll show you in just a second and go through all the components of that through my demo. And now I'm going to switch over and I'm going to do a live demo of the tool. All right. Great. So this is the landing screen for the SB 1000 toolkit. Here you can see as we scroll down the page, kind of the FAQ about what SB 1000 is, what does it mean for my community, what are the priority equity communities overall. And then it has a section about the tools within the website, the EJ Plan Builder. Again, this is the policy toolkit for communities to use, the data tools that are available to individual jurisdictions, as well as the resource library overall. So I'm going to go in and show you different components of the toolkit, and I am going to start first with the EJ summary dashboard. So these are the data tools that are part of the toolkit itself. And if someone wants to kind of shout out or message a particular jurisdiction or subregion, we can kind of look at what that looks like in the tool. So anyone want to shout out a jurisdiction? City of San Bernardino, you got it. So we could use these filters here. So we'll use the incorporated place names, San Bernardino. So it zooms into the city of San Bernardino. This is the community itself. The purple areas are those areas that we worked with the county and community partners to really establish what those priority equity communities are. So you can see within the city of San Bernardino, there are 45 different census tracts that have been identified as priority equity communities, and that 205,000 people live within those areas. You can kind of see the average pollution scores for those areas, the average median income. So the county overall at 78,000 versus the selected geography of 54,000 people. So we can kind of start to compare the jurisdiction and the priority equity communities to the county as a whole overall. So let's say we want to zoom in, we want to scroll in and zoom in a little bit to understand a little bit more about the different areas. So we can go in near the airport, we can click on a particular census tract. We can then see the specific characteristics of the populations living in those census tracts, the environmental burden associated with those census tracts. So you can see the EnviroScreen scores is 100% for ozone, cleanup sites at 80%, groundwater threats at 89%. So we can start to really understand the characteristics of each of those within each of those communities. Now we can then start to really layer on other things if we're interested. We can start to look at, maybe you're really interested in TCAC areas, maybe you're interested in the intersection between your housing element and your housing element policy, as well as the environmental justice. So we can start to look at areas. Now we've filtered a little bit. So now we're looking at low resource areas and high pollution burden areas. So we've sort of filtered down those selections of census tracts within the city of San Bernardino overall. Sue just asked in the chat if we can use this for areas in California that are outside the SCAG areas. No, this is a custom tool built for SBCTA, SBCOG, and the county. So we focused it on the county overall. And then so we can start to filter these. We can look at areas that have lower income levels. We can filter it down by, we know that the statewide average is about 78,000. So we can look at that. We can kind of filter it down even further. So we can start to think about these geographies and some of the characteristics of those geographies. Now, we also have a more detailed mapping tool for folks to use here in the county as well. So in this mapping tool, this functions more simply. We've just zoomed into Rialto here. You can see the purple PECs, so the priority equity communities. But here we can look a little bit more closely at the different environmental burdens. So we can look at high truck traffic locations in the county. You can see You can see those locations here. We can look at existing warehouses within the county and see how those overlay where those are located in Rialto, if that's the community that you're interested in doing more analysis on. And then again, we wanted people to think about not just the environmental justice and environmental pollution aspects of this, but how this intersects with your housing elements and how this intersects with the affirmatively furthering fair housing requirements. And we included things about TCAC areas of high segregation and poverty, opportunity zone score. So we can start to really, you as an individual or a jurisdiction or just as a member of the community can really start to overlay each of those overall. We can also export this data out. So if you're a jurisdiction, you can export this out both as spreadsheets or as maps so that you could use these directly in your environmental justice element, especially if you don't have capacity to do a lot of GIS analysis in-house, but the intent is to really give people lots of opportunities to use this and build their EJ elements out. So that's the mapping tools. And then I'll just show two quick examples of the data analysis tools that are built in. There's actually 3 dashboards. I'll show 2 of them very quickly. Does someone want to call out a different community or different sub-region either in the chat, or you can just shout it out elsewhere? Just in the San Bernardino County? Anyone? Don't be shy. Unfortunately, I can't do Pacoima because that's a different part of the region. Thank you. Highland. There we go. So we can look at place names here. So we'll include Highland. So this is just the information for Highland. So we can see we have about 5 of the census tracts that are priority equity communities, that there are about 22,000 people that live in those priority equity communities. So a very high proportion of the population, over 50% in Highland, live in those. We can also then go to this. This is a second dashboard, and I'll show Yucaipa next. And here we can see this is Yucaipa overall. Let's see if we can show everyone it. Oh, but this dashboard shows the relationship between every community within the county. You can see how each of the communities stacks up. So this is on the one side, the Cal and virus screen percentile, and on this side, the poverty percentile. So if we wanted to change it to a particular burden, we could look at ozone particulate, and we could see that all the communities within the county, nearly every single one of them, have a pollution burden score over 75% for ozone. We can look at a different one, maybe PM 2.5 we're interested, and you can see there's a different distribution. Certain jurisdictions are here overall on the high side of pollution burden, and you can kind of click on them and get the statistics for each of those jurisdictions. So this allows you then to compare those EnviroScreen exposure indicators that are part of Cal EnviroScreen with a series of sensitivity indicators. So let's look at asthma percentile. So we can look at the distribution of high asthma percentile and high exposure to PM 2.5. So we can start to look at and triangulate not just an individual jurisdiction's relationship between environmental burdens and sensitive populations, but across the county. So we can start to think about what that means for policymaking kind of countywide as well as locally. So those are some of the technical tools that are part of the toolkit itself. I'm going to go through just a couple more things and then I'll pause for questions. But the next big piece of the toolkit is the EJ Builder. And this section is really to help jurisdictions develop goals, policies, and actions for their general plans. So there's some background information. There are these topic areas. We describe what a goal, policy, and action is, for those who might not know. And then we have actually, and I didn't mention this before, but same with our data toolkits, we have a series of like how-to videos, right? So how do I use this information if I'm a jurisdiction or a community member who's interested in doing it? So we've got these short videos. This one's 4 minutes on how to use the plan builder overall. So let's say we're interested in reducing pollution exposure, right? We just saw those super duper high ozone levels in the county. Let's say we're interested in pollution burden. So you click on that, you go to reduce pollution exposure. Each of those topic areas has a series of goals, and then under each goal, you have a series of sample policies that you could use for your general plan. Again, this is on reducing pollution exposure. Now, let's go back one. Oops, I'll go back one. And you can see here, there's also actions. So similarly, you can click on the actions and it'll take you to a page with specific actions that you can incorporate into your general plans for this specific topic area. Now, what's kind of fun and interesting about this is let's say I really want to, I really like goal 3. This is the one for me. What you can do in this is add it to your list. So you can then go in, and then once you've added it to your list, you can have a series of goals or actions that you want, and you can kind of save them. So you kind of create your own little account, and then you can save them and you can come back to them. So you don't have to do this each time, like which goal was it that I really liked? Which are the ones that I thought were most appropriate last time? But you can kind of pull them all together into a cart. It's essentially a cart, right? That you do for your shopping for your policies and your actions. And then simultaneously, you can also download these, right? So this gives you an opportunity to get a Word document with all of the the goals and policy language in it, as well as the actions. So it gives you, instead of having to copy and paste things off the website, it's already formatted for you, so you can then pull it into your Word document you're using to develop your environmental justice element. So that's kind of how the EJ Plan Builder works. Again, you go through the process of identifying the particular hazards you have in your community, and then you start to pool all the policies, the sample goals, policies, and actions together that you think work best for your community. And then we hope you adapt them for your local conditions, for programs that you're already working on, partnerships that you maybe already have going in the community, and really use these as a resource. Last section in the toolkit is a resource library. So again, we have fact sheets on kind of what is SB 1000. This is kind of a community oriented one. We have a more detailed one. So we often find that communities would like one for community facing, and then one for decision makers who may be who have more detailed questions about the process, as well as a much more detailed FAQ or primer. Again, the intent of these, at least in our feeling, is, you can use these, you can attach them to staff reports, use them as communication tools in your process. Overall, you can hand them out at community meetings. All that model language that's on the website, we have it all in one PDF if that's a way that you prefer it. And then I'll highlight a couple things here. One is that we did a summary of all of the comment letters that the Attorney General had published. And so when they send a jurisdiction a letter about their general plan and environmental justice element, it's a very detailed letter. So what we've done is taken all the practices policies, programs that it has identified, and then sort of pooled them all together so you can get a sense of what the Attorney General's office is looking for, or opportunities to strengthen your environmental justice element. And then finally, we've got a racial equity assessment tool that you can use when you're actually implementing your program. So you do your general plan, you have a bunch of actions that you're going to do as a kind of takeaway from your general plan and the element. This tool is really meant to help assess both who's involved in the process, how the benefits and burdens are distributed amongst different populations, particularly the priority equity communities, and then how we can then tailor both the process as well as the program implementation to really support those equity priority communities moving forward. So the idea is it's a kind of a tool or a check you can use in your work overall. Then there's some additional resources, lots of great state resources that are out there, as well as ones from SEHA and others that are just really great background resources overall to help you in developing your environmental justice elements. So that was a lot, but I know Mairany and I are here to take questions. We can show more tools. We're just excited to share all this great work that the county's been doing and think about how it can be useful for other jurisdictions as well as those in San Bernardino County. So thanks everyone for coming today.
Thank you so much, Eric, for that. I'm super excited about this work. It seems like other people in the chat are excited about it. I think it's very cool. There was a question about asking if there was a health data to overlay, and I think we kind of touched on the sensitive populations in the, I can't remember exactly what the tool is called, but the like visualization tool. So I know that those are part of CalEnviroScreen and they're sensitive populations, but don't know if you have any other response to that question.
Sorry, I was just also refreshing my memory too. Thanks for the question. There's some of the sensitivity indicators from EnviroScreen are incorporated into the tools themselves, and that includes asthma related emergency department visits, I believe. We don't have like the full set of health data that you might find on the Healthy Places Index, which has essentially a very expansive list of the social determinants of health and the components of that, and a much broader set of health indicators overall. But that's certainly something that if you're doing this work, it would be good to take a look at that information as well.
Awesome. And there's another question. Are tribes included in the definition of priority equity community? And from SCAG's end, so like I know that our definitions are aligned, but not maybe like not exactly the same, but for SCAG's priority equity communities, tribes are not specifically named, but there's so much overlap with our tribal areas for our definition of priority equity communities. But I don't know, maybe Mairany or Eric, if you've included tribes in SBCTA's definition.
Mairany, do you remember offhand if that was? I think they're included in the SB 535 census tracts, and that is one of the components of our tool. So I can't remember if it's the entire tribal nations area or a portion of it, but the 535 tracts are included.
Yeah, I was trying to remember, but I think you're right about the tracks.
Great. So it seems like they're included in like the DAC, like a state definition of disadvantaged communities, which is when we talk about it as SCAG too, it's like inclusive of all of these. There's like several equity area definitions, and when it comes to our funding and our discussions of equity areas in SCAG region, we are talking about like the federal definition, the state definition, the Caltrans specific transportation equity indicator or index definition. So like all of these different definitions of equity area. But yeah, tribes are included in SB 535, at least the latest iteration of it. Thanks for that question though, Nick. And are there any other questions from the group? Any thoughts we'd like to share? Nick again. Okay. How scalable are these tools, and is the underlying code behind these tools published openly for others to use or build upon? Great question.
Good question, Nick. So we at Raimi have our own statewide version of this that we use for the work that we do, right? So it might be everything from evaluating an RFP that a community puts out for a general plan. We use it to see as a first pass, like, hey, are there disadvantaged communities within this area? We use it for our own assessment and analysis generally. So it is definitely scalable. We've talked to the Attorney General's office about scaling it up for the state overall. It's not an area that they have kind of dabbled in before. It's kind of more of an OPR style tool, right, in support of the general plans, but it's definitely a scalable set of tools, right? It's an ArcGIS online platform, which most of us as planners at least have some exposure to and experience with, and then Microsoft Power BI information. A lot of it's from EnviroScreen and or Census or various state databases of TCAC areas and similar. So a lot of it is scalable. For some of it, it can be built directly in with live data feeds, right? Some of it though requires some update regularly as new data becomes available, because some things don't have live data feeds in the same way, like say the census data does have a live data feed.
Great. Nick, hopefully that answers your question, but if you have any follow-ups, feel free to also come off mute if you want to participate in the conversation. But feel free to keep on putting questions in the chat as they come up. But we do have another quick presentation from Jeannie about more tools for the SCAG region. So I will hand it back to Jeannie for this last presentation. Go for it.
Thank you, Emily. So I'm going to provide a quick overview on the on the Equity Resources for Action Area Toolbox. And so essentially what this toolbox is that it is a compilation of best practices and existing policies and strategies that, so these are essentially model practices and policies that were drawn from other jurisdictions, statewide and countywide organizations that essentially did a lot of efforts on equity and EJ related tasks and policies. So this was originally updated from the 2021 SCAG Environmental Justice Toolbox. And the objective of that toolbox, and this one in particular, again, is to help satisfy certain SB 1000 requirements, as well as to drive a lot of EJ related goals and programs and policies. And it was heavily inspired by the California Environmental Justice Alliance, or CEJA SB 1000 Toolkit. And as we venture through the toolbox in this presentation, it is organized by the Connect SoCal 2024 goals: mobility, communities, environment, and economy. And so this slide just provides you with the overall structure of each section of the toolbox. So it starts off with the goals mentioned before, and it also includes the relevant general plan elements, such as maybe a safety element or a housing element, and then continues on with the topics and subtopics. So that would be community engagement, the subtopic being develop effective community engagement and public outreach, and then provides a list of recommendations that were drawn from our research for the resources and examples. And each section will have our own resources and examples along with the links so that you can get the direct resource that all these recommendations were drawn from. And so the first section that we're going to go over is the mobility section. It provides recommended practices and approaches to address mobility inequities and transportation related impacts. Some topics that are covered are TODs, Vision Zero programs such as Complete, Safe, and Active Streets, as well as safe and affordable transportation options. So the first topic that we're going to go over is affordable and accessible transportation. Essentially what this topic goes over is a bunch of recommendations that are focused on integrating a lot of accessible and affordable transportation options that were drawn from specific resources. Some are highlighted in the right side. So the first being LA Metro's LIFE program, which provides free rides based on the rider's income status. The next resource that inspired this section was the Federal Transit Administration's technical assistance. And on this page in particular that's referenced in the Air Toolbox, it provides a lot of resources and materials on how to integrate a lot of those policies and goals. And it also provides their own technical assistance if there is a Department of Transportation or transit agency seeking to integrate all those policies and goals as well. The last one is the City of Los Angeles Department of Transportation's Universal Basic Income. This is actually a very well established and a very fleshed out program. But for this particular section, we drew a lot from the fact that they had fair payment subsidies and how that could be integrated to a transit agency if they're looking to help a lot of riders who may be in need of more affordable options. The next section that the Air Toolbox goes over is the community section. This particular section provides recommended practices and approaches centered on equitable engagement and specialized populations. This might be a lot in terms of empowering communities through decision making. It goes over participatory budgeting committees and programs, and also goes into a lot of factors that are involved with protecting and securing housing as well. So for this one, we want to highlight a specific topic, which is implement participatory budgeting committees and programs. This particular these particular recommendations go over how you could conduct community engagement with the communities, as well as making collaborative effort with local jurisdictions and communities to ensure that a lot of funding is going to this participatory budget, as well as establishing a committee for PBs as well. So some resources that are mentioned in this specific section is LA Repair. This is a pilot program going on right now, and essentially LA Repair has a lot of zones within the city of Los Angeles where they're hoping to actually distribute a lot of the funding from their PB to specific neighborhoods in the city of Los Angeles. So they do a great job of establishing that framework on how they started the PB, as well as the fact how they are seeking funding, as well as where the funding is going to specifically. The next resource is the Institute for Local Government Participatory Budgeting Resources. I think this is a really good foundation for local jurisdictions just looking to start PBs and gain more information, because a lot of the resources is somewhat generalized, but still provides enough substance where you can get more research out of that as well. And the last resource is City of Long Beach's People's Budget. And essentially this is a well-established PB as well. It's been here for a good amount of time, and they have a really well thought out mission statement, goals and lists that tell you where the funding is coming from and where specifically parts of the communities as well as the cities are going to. And they also have their own toolkit. So again, it provides a lot of foundations as to how their own PB started and how other communities might start their own PBs as well. The next section is the environment section, which provides recommended practices and approaches to create healthier and more resilient communities who are disproportionately impacted by the effects of climate change, poor air quality, and other stressors. Some topics that are covered are climate resilience, air quality, and land stewardship. And for this particular topic, it goes into a lot of detail of how local jurisdictions can integrate land stewardships to help with agricultural uses, protecting farmers, as well as finding ways to work with tribal organizations and communities to protect sacred grounds or tribal grounds as well. So one of the first resources that we drew a lot of inspiration from to write up these recommendations is the California Water Resource Department, specifically their agriculture and land stewardship framework and strategies. And this one goes into great detail of how local jurisdictions can embed a lot of these goals and policies into zoning and land use, such as converting existing land uses into agricultural uses, as well as the fact, providing a lot of safeguards for farmers to protect their own land. And then the next resource is the First Nations Development Institute. This was actually authored by a lot of tribal organizations and tribal communities and tribal organizations as well, and goes into a lot of detail how a lot of tribal organizations can protect their tribal lands, as well as working with other entities as well to have a more collaborative effort and to give more agency to tribal groups as well through land stewardship. And the final section that the Air Toolbox goes over is the economy section. And this provides a lot of approaches and strategies to address a lot of social and environmental factors that were influenced by the economy. Some of these topics cover job training, commercial districts, as well as implementing road pricing. And so one of the topics is the vulnerable workers protection. And this provides a lot of opportunities for local jurisdictions to find ways to help and support as well as protect a lot of vulnerable workers. So with that, the California Employment Development Department actually has a lot of good resources on how they're currently supporting migrant and seasonal farm workers. And you can find a lot of those resources through the Air Toolbox. And it's a great resource to learn how they go through certain parameters to ensure that a lot of these workers are protected. And then the next one is the County of Los Angeles Department of Economic Opportunity, specifically their sidewalk vending program. So sidewalk vendors are becoming an emergent economy. And so with certain parts of LA County, they have ways in how they start the permitting system, as well as informing sidewalk vendors of their rights and what specific protections there are to ensure that they are able to conduct business in a safe and orderly manner. And this also provides really great brochures and a lot of images. They also have it in Spanish as well. So this is a great resource for those who want to learn more about starting their own sidewalk permitting section in maybe part of their jurisdictions. And then the last resource that we have here is the Platform for International Cooperation on Undocumented Migrants. So this actually has a lot of case studies as well as providing legal cases as to why undocumented migrant workers deserve specific protections, as well as how they can advocate for better working conditions while working with certain types of jurisdictions as well. So overall, those are all the sections of the Air Toolbox, and that was just a little bit of a preview on what we covered in the Air Toolbox, but I'm more than happy to answer any questions you had anything in particular. We'll also be dropping the link in the chat box. So the Air Toolbox is embedded within the Equity Analysis Technical Report. So with that link, you are going directly to the Air Toolbox. It's only 10 pages. It's not like more than 10 pages, but yeah, I just want to give you a quick warning beforehand.
Thank you, Jeannie. Jeannie has put so many hours into researching environmental justice approaches. So big appreciation for you. Yes, that's the Air Toolbox is within the equity analysis, but we are working on publishing a standalone document so that it's just, you can link directly to the toolbox and the resources within as well. So, and Caesar, yes, the recording will be available to everyone after and posted on SCAG's website. I think what Jeannie just presented is such a small bit of all of the resources that are available in the Aero Toolbox, but I think there's just so much overlap between this like PDF word-based tool and SBCTA's EJ plan builder. They have like all of the goals and policies and actions that you can build into your EJ elements or just incorporate within general plans. But you can also explore the Aero Toolbox for more examples and case studies of how people or how agencies have incorporated EJ into their projects and actions. So I hope these two resources are useful and will help the SCAG region and beyond incorporate environmental justice better into our plans and programs. Are there any questions or thoughts that come up from Jeannie's presentation or any other environmental justice and SB 1000 points that we'd like to hit on? I'm very okay with leaving space for this thanks, Sue. As we try out these tools, is there a contact for questions? Of course. So you're welcome to reach out to SCAG at environmentaljustice@scag.ca.gov, and we can hopefully just put that in the chat really quick. As for SBCTA, Mairany, would you be okay sharing your email?
Yes, of course. I'll drop it in the chat.
Beautiful. And we'll put it in the Toolbox Tuesday follow-up as well, so that you can reach out to us. Because I think on the recording the chat doesn't always come through, so we'll be able to post that as well. Yeah, thanks, Sue. And Jennifer, maybe we can pop up that last slide with the feedback box. But in the meantime, any other questions? Oh yeah, Eric, sorry, I'm so sorry. Feel free to contact Eric too as well for any support on the tools. Will the research documents offered by the tools be updated periodically? Yeah, so the SCAG's Aero Toolbox is an update to the previously published EJ Toolbox. We changed the acronym on it because it really went beyond just the realm of environmental justice. And more into racial equity space. So yes, we're constantly updating our resources. And our next update will likely be as a part of our for every 4-year plan update of long-range regional transportation plan. And Mairany, maybe you can answer on the SB 1000 Equity Toolkit side. How often do you have any plans for updates, any next steps in terms of this project for your agency?
Yeah, so we will be updating the toolkit as new data becomes available. So we'll always make sure that it's current.
Awesome. So regular updates to come, and yeah, will hopefully be very easy to find on both of our websites. So that's always an aim for me. Thanks, Isidra, for that question. And any other questions or thoughts from the audience? And if you haven't already, there's several opportunities to take this short survey about our Toolbox Tuesdays. It's an opportunity to provide SCAG a little bit of feedback. We share this with our speakers, so Mairany and Eric, look out for that email. And also an opportunity to submit ideas for future Toolbox Tuesdays. So if you're looking to hear about something in particular and haven't seen a session about it already, even if you have and would like to see more about it, feel free to enter that in the survey. So thank you all so much. Thank you especially to Mairany and Eric for coming in and presenting for us today. Thanks for your expertise and knowledge sharing. And thank you to Jennifer Martinez, who provided AV support. Really appreciate you. And our SCAG team, for Amanda, Jeannie, Anita, Jasper for supporting this session. So thank you all. Hope you all have a great day.